Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Governor, for this opportunity just to talk a little bit about housing a little more. So my name is Seila Mosquera-Bruno. I'm the Commissioner for the Department of Housing. And what a great time that my boss to speak about housing. And I don't want to repeat what he said, but I just want to mention a couple of things. First of all, for me, housing is the foundation of our communities to support economic growth. And I will talk a little bit about what have we been doing at the Department of Housing. Do you have the slide? Through these past 4 years. So you can hear about the foundation that we have created so that we can imagine how we're gonna move forward in the next 10 years. $2.3 billion is what we have created in development activities. The state put in about $400 million, and with that, we generated about $1.9 billion. That is about $4 for each dollar that the state invests. And I'll give you some examples of some of the work that we have been doing. Was the before that? Next one, okay. So transformation, when we talk about transformation, this is a public housing in Hartford that was demolished under our administration. And the way that we have invested resources, our resources, the Connecticut Housing Finance resources, the private investments, becomes, the next slide, please. This, more than 300 units with space, walkable, amenities for the residents, and there will be some retail and also homeownership. It's not going to be all 100% rental, but it has a combination, which is what, to the governor's point, that we are trying to provide options. Options that if you want to be a renter, you be a renter, and you have that opportunity. If you want to be a homeowner, you have that opportunity to be able to build equity. This is in Hartford, so we work in the big cities, small cities, and in rural towns. So the next example is in Torrington. This is a brownfield redevelopment. Another thing that we're doing is that we work very collaborative with our sister agencies. DECD provided brownfield resources to this development, and with the financing that we provided in CHFA, we got now this beautiful building that provides is a mixed income from affordable all the way to market rate. And it's a beautiful building. It has walkability. On the other side is the river, as you can see. So it took advantage, the design of this building took advantage of the landscape that we have in Torrington. And of course, our small towns, Jocelyn, this is one of Jocelyn's communities. They work, this is the Litchfield Trust, and they work with the Land Trust Conservation and got a space, I don't remember how many acres, but they wanted to have homeownership because the rural areas are losing population, they're aging, and they want kids. So when I met with them and they said, we want family housing, we want 3 bedrooms, so we want children. And usually what you hear from communities is, we don't want children. So they build 10 houses for sale, and they're going to be building another 20 units in Litchfield. So that's the type of projects that we do. We have 3 approaches how we are supporting our communities. One is that we want to produce more units. We want to be able to meet the current demand and the future demand of our residents. Next one is that we want to preserve what we have, affordability, and be able that those residents now live in better conditions. And third is the diversity. We want to have a diverse way of building, rental, homeownership, senior housing, condominiums, not only single families. So those opportunities will provide options to our residents in Connecticut. So with that, I'm going to invite Dan to talk a little bit about DECD.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. So Dan O'Keefe, good to meet you all. I joined the Lamont administration in July as Chief Innovation Officer. Last Tuesday, I accepted the governor's nomination as the next Commissioner of Economic Development, so I believe now my title is Commissioner-designate. I learned today that we're adding czar to the mix, so thank you, Governor, for not only the opportunity and the elevated title, but the multitude of them. But I'm excited to talk to you today about the vision for cities of the future. And it's impossible not to talk about the vision for cities of the future without talking a little bit about the organizing principles of our cities of the past. And as I do this, please know that I'm going to make some gross generalities. Please permit me some license here, because I'm going to make some points that I think are important. And the two words that I'm hoping you'll remember from this discussion are vibrancy and resiliency. And so if you look at how the approach we took to cities of the past, you know, they tended to be, the organizing principle tended to be a commercial use case. We would have these very large buildings, 100% typically would be used for commercial purposes, and then you'd see energy sort of shift towards the suburbs during non-work hours, and you also saw affordable housing that often aligned in denser environments within those urban cores, and then in the exurbs, so a little further out, typically supported by mass transit. Now, I'm not suggesting any of that goes away. I mean, that has been the organizing principle, will continue to be an important component of it. But what we're seeing is we're seeing our world evolve. By the way, it was already evolving, but I think it got accelerated by the pandemic. And so what we ended up seeing is that approach to our cities compartmentalized the vibrancy. And for a long time, that was fine. When we had a structured work week, it was okay to have the vibrancy organized around the work week in the city and then shift to the suburbs at evening and weekends. But the pandemic changed the rules. And now what we're seeing is people don't want that anymore. They want urban environments, they want suburban environments that have diverse, dynamic energy. And I think that's how the world's evolving, and frankly, I think that's what we have to embrace. So if you go to the next slide, the future is mixed use. So what we're seeing now and what we're seeing accelerate and what we want to continue to support is these use cases that are mixed in nature. You don't necessarily go to one place to work, one place to live, one place to play. A lot of that is now happening in the same place, and we're supporting transit-oriented development around some of these areas to make sure there's more flexibility. Go to the next slide. People want walkable environments. They want to be able to walk around these different use cases and do it in ways that frankly feel pleasant. So we're very focused on continuing to support this concept of parks and forestry and greenery. Next slide. Variety of housing. So again, I'll come back to this concept where in the past, you know, sort of economic forces often defined where more accessible housing existed. And we as an administration are very, very focused on making sure that that variety, as Seila was talking about, exists in all places. It isn't necessarily solely around a certain geography. Next slide. A question came up before about our waterfront. I think over the next 10 years and really over the next 50 years, we're going to reclaim our waterfront. If you look at what's happened historically, you saw a lot of transportation highways around our rivers. It's sort of obvious why, right? You didn't have to knock down a house to build that highway. And you saw a lot of industrial use cases along our waterfront. Again, pretty obvious why, they needed access to water. But as we embrace a future that's more supported by sustainable energy sources, and we have programs focused on remediation of industrial sites, we'll start to reclaim our waterfront, and this is some imagery of how we think that can look. You can't have a city of the future without the energy of the future. So as we reimagine some of these urban spaces, we are very focused on making sure that we have the infrastructure to support emissionless cars and access to renewable energy sources. As we've seen this reimagining of urban cities, we've seen younger families moving in. And it's something I think that is a little bit generational. One thing, I'm part of an older generation, I will admit it now, even though I fight it. You know, when I had a younger family, we lived in a city, a large city, and we felt like that was where we needed to be just to have access to infrastructure. What we're seeing now as we reimagine our cities for, again, this mixed use case, more and more younger families are moving in, and that brings in a lot of the energy we're seeking to promote. I'm going to combine these next two slides into one important point. I keep commenting on this concept of vibrancy. You cannot have vibrancy if you don't both embrace your past while you invest in your future and also have a concept of culture. So continuing to promote public arts and culture experiences, next slide, and sort of tourist destinations, this is an incredibly important part of that concept of vibrancy. I mentioned before you can't have the city of the future without the energy sources of the future. You also have to have the workforce of the future. So part of this concept of mixed use is not just where you live and work and play, but also where you learn. Now, I want to close on the concept of resiliency. It's an economic byproduct that was unintentional, but when you build these cities that are structured around a principally commercial use case, you end up with a degree of rigidity that was unintentional. What that means is when economics cycle, and for the business folks in the room, economic cycles always cycle, it can be challenging to reinvent your physical space. The industries can move quicker than your physical space can. And so an unintentional but important byproduct of a more mixed-use vision of the future is it will allow us as a state and as municipalities to evolve the needs of these physical spaces as industries evolve. You won't, in theory, and I think the theory is sound, end up with the same high degree of vacancy rates when one industry might ebb and one flow. So that's sort of an unintentional byproduct, but I think an important one as well, this concept of economic resiliency. All right, with that, I think I can close and we can move to the panel discussion. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time. And please do come think of questions. We'd love to hear some questions from you all.
Thank you, Dan. In the past, when I was a developer, I used to go to our politicians, elected officials, and say, hey, housing is economic development, and nobody would pay attention. That was in the affordable housing field, right? And today, when you see the numbers of what the state investment leverage, $1, and then we bring $4 for each dollar that we invest, is definitely economic development, especially because we also provide jobs, not only construction, but we have lawyers, we have accountants, we have compliance, we have a lot of people that work in this industry. So with that, I'm going to introduce our panels that grateful, accepted to be here today, and I'm going to ask them to just introduce yourself. Start with Jeff.
Hi, my name's Geoffrey Sager, Metro Realty. We're Farmington-based ground-up developers and investors. Been in business for 34 years. We build medical office buildings and multifamily, both affordable and market rate. Pleasure to be here.
Hey, my name's Davidson. I run High Tide Capital, a developer that focuses exclusively on historic buildings. Been in business a little less time than Jeff here, but we focus in Connecticut and New London, work a lot with Felix Reyes, so really excited to be here and talk a little bit about our experience. Thanks.
Hi, and I'm Mark Lauretti, Mayor of the City of Shelton, now entering my 33rd year as mayor, and I specialize in low taxes and reinventing cities.
Thank you. And I'm going to start with Mayor Lauretti. I have learned to see his work in the city of Shelton, and I'm going to ask you, Canal Street is one of the communities or neighborhoods where I have seen the progress for the past 15, 20 years. Just tell us a little bit about how did you do that planning process, but what is success? I mean, what were those things that you learned that help you to develop that so some of our municipalities can learn or be compassionate about the work that needs to be done, right? And it's good days and bad days. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you certainly have to have passion. Government's a challenge, public is a challenge, and you've got to find common ground and meld the two together. I mentioned earlier that I specialize in reinventing cities. If you took a picture of the city of Shelton in 1992, it's a very different place today. And I tell you that because Shelton wasn't very much different than a lot of places throughout New England and the East Coast of the United States. We were a place 50, 100 years ago where we made things. We were big manufacturers, and that's where people worked. And when all that went away, left behind was empty buildings that created blight and problematic conditions for cities and towns across New England and across the country. You know, when you change your environmental laws and you make it very restrictive for property owners, the thing they do is they walk away. And these properties sit vacant and become blighted and become areas of illegal activities, drug selling, and homeless people move in, and just brings the whole image of your community down. And so we reversed that negative trend, and we did it really with a lot of help from the state and federal government with the brownfields program that's been initiated a few years back. I will say that with government, for all its faults, they really got this one right. Because when you take a piece of property that has sat vacant for 40 years and put something new and exciting and different on it, when you have a piece of property that only paid $4,000 a year in taxes, and even the property owner walked away and didn't pay it, and now it pays $400,000, I think it's a pretty good return on investment. And those are the things that I have focused on, in particular with downtown Shelton. It sits, the Commissioner mentioned Canal Street, sits right on the Housatonic River. We have 9 miles of riverfront in Shelton. And I told people in Bridgeport many years ago when they wanted to set up their harbor that the Shelton wanted to be included on it. And they looked at me through cross eyes, and they said, "Well, why would Shelton's quite a bit away from Bridgeport in the harbor?" I said, "Well, look, you can get anywhere in the world from downtown Shelton by water." So, we're a region, and we've got to be committed to supporting one another, and I wanted to support that initiative. And so people, have supported me. And I think that with the Canal Street alone, we've gotten close to $20 million from the state and federal government over the last 20, 25 years. The city itself has put in quite a bit of money to help that effort. And, if you look at the before and after pictures, you'd be in awe of what you see there. We took the old B.F. Goodrich site, which was probably about 10 acres of a manufacturer, the site of the largest arson fire in the United States history as we sit here today. And we took an area that people couldn't get to, that was blighted, was run down, was destroyed by a fire. And now, on any given day, and the first thing that comes into my mind was our fireworks celebration where we host right on that site. We'll get anywhere from 15 to 20,000 people will show up. And if you don't believe me, you can ask the governor, because he came down one year to witness and was in awe of what he saw there. But you talk, if it cost us $6 or $7 million to rehabilitate that piece of property, just think about what you get forever. Public involvement. The public is able to access it. To me, that's money well spent. That's just one example of some of the things that we've done.
Great.
Thank you, Mayor.
And I would love to, an important public perspective on how you attract sort of private investment and at times perhaps use this leverage state resources to make it profitable to do so. I would be curious to hear the developer side of things in terms of what attracts you. And specifically, as you think, Dash, about the different places you could go, because you could go anywhere, right? There's no shortage of historic buildings in the world. So when you think about what you look for before entering into a project, what are some of the characteristics you look for? And I'd love to hear, kind of the important question for this room, why has it been Connecticut when it's been Connecticut?
Yeah, thank you. I think specifically for us in New London is where we've concentrated all our investment in the state to date. And I think Felix talked a little bit about it, but New London is just such an incredible city for so many reasons, not least of all its fantastic history, and for us, it's fantastic stock of historic buildings. But beyond that, talk about transit-oriented development. In New London, you have Amtrak taking you to New York City, taking you to Boston right at your doorstep. You have ferries taking you across the Sound. You have I-95. So in our buildings alone, there are people who work and commute to Boston, people who work and commute to New York City. And that is pretty amazing. And neither of those tenants have cars. So I think when you think about the value of public transit and the value of those investments, as the senator was talking about earlier, I think that is one of the things, as people have mentioned, that's really making Connecticut extremely appealing. And as the governor was mentioning earlier as well, I think the real impact of remote work and the post-pandemic lifestyle, I think it's still just starting to really sink in, and for places that have an amazing quality of life, or you're on the waterfront, you can have a more affordable lifestyle, a more affordable housing option like New London. You're just seeing a lot more people leaving the big cities, because why would you live in Crown Heights paying $4,000 a month in a 4-story walk-up when you can do the same job and live in New London, Connecticut for half as much and twice as nice a place? So I think that's just starting to filter down through all sectors of our economy. But I think for these, smaller towns in New England that are blessed with great physical beauty, with great cultural history, with great, physical history, and then also have the combination of being accessible, that's what really attracted us to New London specifically. It's kind of the nexus of all these factors.
Thank you, Dash, and thank you for coming to Connecticut. And we have now a local developer. Jeff has been in the space of developing for many, many years. As a developer, as an investor, doing retail, affordable housing, market rate housing. In the space of the affordable housing, I know that you did some many years back, but now you are in the space again. We just did a ribbon cutting in Berlin for Damian Rich, was a mixed income housing. So just tell us why now.
Sure. So we started building affordable housing in 1990, did so for about 22 years, got away from it in about 2012. And the reason was we were no longer competitive. It wasn't, we build in high opportunity towns, and high opportunity towns weren't the priority. So we weren't able to secure the financing, and that has since changed, which we applaud. And so we applied most recently in Berlin. The application was processed extremely rapidly, both at CHFA and DOH. We were, from application to closing was about 5 months, and we were able to build it in 14. So in a year and a half from application, we were able to bring a project online. And most recently, I just closed on another one in Farmington. It's a little more deeply income targeted, but again, we're able to rapidly process that application and get a green light to get in the ground. So from when I applied to when I got in the ground was probably about 4 months. But look, the environment right now in Connecticut is great. There's big demand for market rate housing, and there's an insatiable demand for affordable housing. There's been thousands of apartments built. We operate exclusively in Hartford County, and the occupancy levels are still very high. There's a robust pipeline coming in behind that. And I think in addition to just creating the housing, it is attractive for employers, because when employers come to town, they want to see that housing. So it's great that we're creating it. But to build housing, I need 3 things, or a developer needs 3 things. You have to have the demand, and there's robust demand right now. You have to be able to get permits, and you have to have the capital for the income group that you're targeting. And so we talked about the demand. In terms of permitting, it's getting better. The value of multifamily on market rate is very high. Towns realize that perhaps they can get $5,000 a unit in annual real estate taxes. So a 200-unit development's paying $1 million a year. They understand the economic benefit of that. In addition to that, the state policy on 8-30J has really been great, because towns now all have embraced affordable, maybe not all, most have embraced affordable housing plans. And when I go before a commission, it's top of mind for them, because they've recently authored the plan. And we're able to get them to understand, okay, this works. As part of them developing those affordable housing plans, it was also accompanied by an educational process. So if a commission member came to the commission with reservations about affordable housing, after they've been through that educational process, perhaps those reservations have gone away. But that policy has been very instrumental in getting a lot of affordable housing zoned. So one of the things you have to, I know I'm giving you a long-winded answer, but one of the things you have to appreciate is that in order for me to invest in affordable housing, I'm taking a several $100,000 risk that I am going to, you know, when I design, do all the engineering, all the architectural work, that I'm going to get approved in any given town. So the fact that the permitting has gotten better is an inducement for me that, okay, I'm going to take that risk. And then just the last thing, the third component is just capital. The $800 million that was set aside or to be bonded for affordable housing is huge. That's going to be leveraged into the billions of dollars. It's going to be lots of homes. It's going to be lots of jobs. It's targeted at different income levels. You have deep income targeting and commitments to that. You have the new market rate, or not market rate, but it's middle income. And that's going to be, there's going to be a lot of demand for those resources. They're going to be leveraged effectively. And that whole environment has just kind of been an inducement for me to get back into the space, if you will.
Thank you, Jeff. And what Jeff was talking about is our new product, Built for CT, which is geared towards attracting the private sector, the private market, to provide us some affordable units for the middle income. So it has had a great success. We have a pipeline that probably the first allocation is going to be gone in the next 2 months. We still, Dan, do you want to?
Yeah, one more question, if I could. I wanted to come back to Mayor Lauretti in the town of Shelton, just in terms of how you've managed growth. And I'll give you the context. You know, I spent the last couple of weeks, and we'll spend the next few months trying to download Commissioner Dom's brain into my own, which is, by the way, an impossible task. But you know, one of the things she has said to me is pay attention to what you're doing. And specifically what she's referring to is, you know, you have been able to keep your mill rates low, manage your budget, but still attract growth to the town, which sometimes shouldn't be a competing priority, but perhaps is. So perhaps you could comment a bit on how you manage resources and priorities and make sure you manage growth without letting necessarily sort of the public spend get out of control.
With a lot of pain and suffering. It's a balancing act. Sometimes you have to take unpopular stands. It's also an educational process when you're dealing with the public and the services that you're trying to provide. But there's two things that I think that are important for a municipality that you must do for success. One is maintain a quality of life. Maintain a good quality of life. That's one of the things that Connecticut is known for. And also make it affordable for every restaurant. I mean, every resident. You know, if I hold a line on taxes, who benefits? Every senior citizen, every young family who's trying to make mortgage payments and pay college tuitions, every business who's trying to make it, every business that wants to expand. You know, if you look at the taxes on a Class A office space, we're probably about $2 and $3 less than everybody else. So if you've got a 100,000 square foot user, do the math. It's pretty simple. And it really, the recruitment comes just in the fact that they do their homework, they understand what the numbers are. You know, it's when you're able to survive as long as I have, it gets a little bit easier, but I've got to tell you, I've had a good supporting cast of people who serve in volunteer capacities on boards and commissions like your land use boards. They're so important that they understand what the big picture is and that you have a master plan. Like we talked a little bit earlier about the downtown area and Canal Street, an area that was totally void of any development or residential life, that now has brand new buildings on it with affordable housing component associated with them. Our Planning and Zoning Commission now, if they're going to give a developer a benefit in terms of the number of units that they get, there's got to be close to 10% of that has to be affordable. And you know, quite honestly, I think that the affordable category gets a bad label. You know, people think the worst in smaller communities about who's coming, the element that's coming. And the element that comes are people that go to work, people that are raising families, people that work in the trades, police officers, firemen, teachers, public city hall employees, all fall in that category. You know, we have over 1,000 units that were approved in downtown Shelton in the last 4 or 5 years, And I would venture to say that the vast majority of the people who habitate those units are people that work in New Haven, at the university, or at the hospitals, people that work at Griffin Hospital, people that go to work in Waterbury and in Bridgeport. So these are people that have disposable income, that are working their way up the economic ladder. And, you know, it's important for future growth in Connecticut that you have places where people can live and feel safe and survive economically.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I
Can I
think,
add one quick
yes,
thing to
go
that?
ahead.
I just wanted to add one quick thing because I deal with the fear of affordable housing all the time. And I just want to make a very quick illustration, which is in the 5 towns where we've built affordable housing, after we've built the first development, we've always been invited back to build more. And in many of those towns, we've now built 5 and 6. So there's apprehension at first, but once they see it, it goes away.
Thank you. Dash, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'd just say kind of very important for our business is support and actual programs run by the state. So, you know, building on your last question, Dan, about what attracted me personally to Connecticut, it was the legitimacy and the potency, frankly, of those programs for us, specifically the state historic tax credit program. So, you know, that's run through DECD, and that really enables, you know, the types of projects we do to happen. And I'm sure Jeff understands this, but, you know, your capital stacks in these projects get to be crazy. And, you know, there's complexity to that. There's also a little bit of fun to that. So, you know, that's what adds the creativity to putting these projects together, because at the end of the day, they're still extremely challenging, and the interest rates being as high as they are, the capital side becomes extremely challenging. So, frankly, without the support of these state agencies and even the federal agencies that are behind them, we at least would not be able to do the development we're able to do. We would not be able to do the private side of the public-private partnership that we're doing with the City of New London right now, you know, without the support of the state. So, thinking about my time investing here in Connecticut, that has been probably the most important thing. It's really working within the framework of the state agencies and being able to take advantage of the programs and the support that you all have. So thank you for that, and we hope it continues.
Thank you, Dash. We do have time for a few questions. We have a lot of experience here, so if anybody has any question for our...
Fairfield County, and tends to be a big problem in my town. But the other things that we're lacking to get transportation as well as infrastructure is the development of sewers. And there's a large lack of the progress of sewers and development. So what can I encourage these small towns to do to get the development of better infrastructure so that we can actually build the housing? Because we don't have the old buildings that are available to convert. We don't have the areas of land set aside. We're basically 2- and 4-acre lots. And so talk to me about how I can invite, because I have 2 train stations in my town that are underutilized because there's no housing there, but there's also limited sewer capacity. So tell me what our next steps are to get that growth going.
So you want me to just touch on that real quick?
You can touch...
Yeah,
go
so
ahead.
the bipartisan infrastructure law has a plus up in the Clean Water Fund, and it sometimes can be complicated because Clean Water Fund, you think, oh, that's drinking water, but it's not, it's sewers. And, you know, I used to say all the time when I was mayor that, you know, sewers may be crap to you, but they're money to us. So, you know, we make money on those rates, right? But it also is an impetus for development. If you have solid sewer access, you're able to add more units and actually build out certain spots at a denser rate. We have encouraged towns, particularly in Fairfield County and all up along eastern Connecticut, to work together on regional plans. So you're not just having one small plant serve one small town. You're actually having one mid-sized plant serving 4 towns or 5 towns. And we've had some success with that. One of the challenges with the bipartisan infrastructure law, and Manelli may agree with me on this side, there has not been enough money put in the Clean Water Fund program. The plus up is really, we could use triple that in that particular area. But it's hard because it's hard to explain because people don't understand what you just articulated, that the benefit to this is that you're going to end up spurring more economic growth and development. So we continue to work on that and carry that message to Washington, D.C. I got to tell you something, you know, I've been in politics, I don't know, 30 years, you know, and this White House has been the most accessible that I've ever seen in my entire life. I literally can get somebody on the phone right now from their infrastructure team to talk about this issue. And then they'll try and rewrite some of the guidance to be able to add more money to this program, maybe from another area that it's not being spent. So my point here is that we have to work together to try to get more money into the Clean Water Fund. That's the main fund that all cities and towns leverage, and we've got to encourage cities and towns to work together to have regional plants that service more than one community, because everybody's trying to do their own one-off. It's impossible. It really is. I know in London, you're looking at, I know in London we've got some challenges there, but we're working on that. We've heard you on that. It's a problem.
But let me just add, Representative, the Department of Housing does have a program called CDBG, the Community Development Block Grants, and we provide those resources for a lot of infrastructure to the small towns. It's for municipalities that has less than 50,000 in the population.
Yeah, and I also want to weigh in on it because I think it's a good question, and I hear a lot of that because, you know, Shelton is the most northerly town in Fairfield County, so we are in tune to what's going on down county and understand what the representative's issues are in his community. You know, one thing that we did years ago is we bought land. We land banked over 2,000 acres of open space, and so we defined areas within the city that we're going to use for development, whether it's residential or whether it's commercial, and the rest of that just stays vacant. And you know, when you make that investment, it doesn't cost you anything anymore. And again, people get to use that for the rest of time. You know, we never had any walking trails in the city of Shelton. We now have 18 miles of walking areas for the public. We did it in our downtown with a river walk. To touch on sewers, you know, we have a sewer system in Shelton, and we spend what we have to spend to upgrade it and make sure there's ample capacity to serve the growth. Now, former Mayor Bill Finch, who's sitting in the audience, he may remember this meeting, but we were all at the Bridgeport Regional Business Council meeting, breakfast, and there was probably 300-400 people in the room, all business people, and he was sparring back and forth with the first selectman of Trumbull about the sewer issue, where Trumbull didn't have sewers and Monroe didn't have sewers. And then it was my turn to speak, and I said, for all of those of you who have a business and you'd like to move, City of Shelton has sewers to accommodate you. I can see the steam coming out of their ears. But to Commissioner Bouton's point, it's an integral part for growth. And that growth doesn't mean sprawl. It means converting your old downtown areas, your areas that are unproductive because they're blighted or they're just underserved, and working and building upon areas that have already been established in your city or your community for development. So the Clean Water Fund is an absolute necessary. You know, the interest rate is 2%. I told him, I said, if I don't have to take the 2%, I'll finance it myself.
Thank you. Thank you. We have one more question.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Laura Francis. I now represent the South Central Regional Council of Governments, but I come to this position with 30 years of municipal service, 15 as first selectman of the town of Durham. So I appreciate all your work and your challenges. But I want to give you, I have a question for you. What are we doing to develop the workforce to do this work? Right now, I believe every one of the 9 council of governments has vacancies. Every single town hall in our state has multiple vacancies. And I know that the state agencies are also challenged. We can't do this work without people.
Yeah.
So what are we doing at the state level to accelerate the development of our workforce?
Yep. I'm happy to take that one. So by the way, I agree with your commentary completely. You can't have economic growth without the people to actually do the work. I would say it's a couple things. First is it's keeping our people here. So working with our higher ed institutions to make sure that their graduating students know they don't have to leave the state of Connecticut to have incredible careers. That goes back to the commentary I was making before. I have this thesis that as the world kind of evolves and the geographic relationship between employer and employee evolves, that individuals are going to increasingly be able to make their own decisions about where to live, independent of necessarily the commute required. And if that's the case, it's a marketing exercise. We need our graduating students to simply know that they can have an incredible, vibrant career here. Second piece is retraining and training our workforce for the industries of the future. The governor has an Office of Workforce Strategies, which we work very closely with. We have a Tech Talent Fund, which is a program to help fund those that are training our workforce for these industries of the future, and retraining those that perhaps are in industries that are in decline towards those newer industries. This is going to take some real time. We have a consistent deficit here that we all see and all acknowledge and recognize. But I think through those two elements, again, keeping those that are being educated here, retraining those that are here but perhaps need to be moved towards these industries of the future, and then attracting new residents as we are. Those three strategies, I think, will ultimately get us there. But I do acknowledge it's going to take some time. But I just want to make sure you all know it is a real area of focus for this administration.
Thank you very much. And I think I have been told that time is up. So I want to thank our panelists. Can we give them a round of applause, please? And for me, on housing, what I envision in 10 years is that our residents have options to live where they want to live, and have also options to live in a rental or in a homeownership. After all, home is where it all starts. Thank you very much for having us.